Hey St. Mary's, it's Danny again, wanting to check in, say hello, let you know that we're praying for you as we head into this third week of not being able to meet the way we normally do in person. I want to share a few ideas, thoughts, hopefully that were inspired through conversations with people in our community and beyond. To hopefully encourage you this week while you're stuck at home or out for essential reasons. The first comes from a conversation I had with a woman from St. Mary's on the phone, and she was sharing how when we are in a fight or flight mode, we are operating out of a part of our brain called the amygdala. And that part of our brain, that part of our thinking, that survival way of being is a place where we tend to fear a lot. And in that fear, we shut off our ability to receive love. And so what I want to invite you in today is to receive love, to move beyond that place of fight, flight, fear, and to take a moment to follow Jesus into his kingdom of perfect peace and love. One of the survival methods that I think we are using fairly generously right now is contempt. There is a function in our brain, there's a function in being human that says we need to protect ourselves, and we often look for something to put our anger on. It can be people we live with, it can be people that run our country, it can be people who do all sorts of things. But contempt reduces others to worthlessness. I texted a friend who's a therapist and asked him what is the antidote to contempt. And he quickly replied, gratitude and delight. And so for us to move beyond contempt, to move beyond the parts of ourselves that won't receive love, the contempt is often not just for others, but the contempt can turn on ourselves. We might be in homes and live on streets where sometimes the community makes us have self-loathing or self-contempt. And the way through it is this gratitude and delight that Jesus invites us into. And so I'm standing outside. I hope you've heard some birds chirping. I hope you've heard some wind blowing through the leaves behind me. Jesus says, consider the lilies. They don't toil. They don't make clothes for themselves, but God clothes them. 2 or 3 days ago, there were no leaves on these trees behind me, and now they're here. The Holy Spirit is renewing the face of the earth. He's bringing life from death, just like he's always done, and like he always will. And Jesus said, consider the birds of the air. They don't build storehouses for their food, but God feeds them. And he says, remember that you mean more to me and to my Father than the birds and the grass and the leaves. And I'll clothe you and I'll feed you and I'll take care of you. He says that he knows when a hair from our head falls to the ground. And then he says, seek the kingdom. Seek it first and know that all of these other things will be added to you. Flannery O'Connor says, you have to cherish the world while you try to endure it. We are in a time that calls for endurance and it calls for patience. But we've got to remember to cherish, to be grateful, and to find delight. We are going to not always do that well. This week's psalm in the lectionary is Psalm 130. The psalmist says, if you, O Lord, kept a record of wrongs, who could stand? Who could stand? But with you there is abundant grace. There is abundant redemption. There is an overflow of mercy. And so as the contempt and the anger and the fear and those things come that push love for God and for each other, aside, I pray that we as a community stop and name them in ourselves with no fear. Paul responds to, if God kept a record of wrong, who could stand, in 1 Corinthians 13, saying that love does not keep a record of wrongs. And so we can be bold in our love, in our receiving of love, and in our sharing of love with one another and the world. I want to tell you one more thing. We had someone visit St. Mary's a few months ago, and who has become part of our community, and she shared with me this week that when she walked in, she could feel the resiliency, and she could feel the tenderness that is part of our community. I want to encourage you for what God has grown in you and in us together, and remind you that we're going to need the tenderness and we're going to need the resiliency. And I hope you receive the acknowledgement and the noticing that our new friend gave us in that gift. And two more words that I want to introduce. We've been praying the Northumbria prayer each night for evening prayer. The Northumbria community is a community in Scotland or Ireland. I don't know my geography. I will look it up. You can look it up. There's a homework project. But their two vows for their community are vulnerability and availability. I want to ask you, if you are especially isolated, if you're especially vulnerable right now, would you please reach out? Would you let us know that so that we can be available to you? It might feel scary, but I want you to know we're here and we are listening and paying attention and alert to the needs that arise in our community and in the needs around us. We want to be a community that's vulnerable and available. So go in peace. It's good to catch up with you. I've enjoyed our texting and our emailing. More to come. You are loved, and I'm grateful to be serving you in this time. Peace.